Welcome to today's 5-Minute Leader. Today I want to talk about something called the reality distortion field. You may or may not be familiar with this concept, but it originally came about as a result of Steve Jobs. And the whole idea was that Steve Jobs had this ability to shape reality around him, where he was able to convince people that they could do anything, when he would create products and services, he would convince people that they were, changing the world, changing people's lives. And the whole idea of this reality distortion field is that Steve Jobs was able to create this new reality for people who were around him. And I think this is a very important thing for leaders. Now, I wanted to actually just share one story here that I pulled up about Steve Jobs and the reality distortion field. So let me just read this to you really quick and you can kind of get a sense of what this is about. So during development of the Macintosh computer in 1984, Steve Jobs asked Larry Kenyon, an engineer, to reduce the Mac boot time by 10 seconds. When Kenyon replied that it was not possible to reduce the time, Steve Jobs asked him, if it would save a person's life, could you find a way to shave 10 seconds off of the boot time? Kenyon said that he could. Jobs went to a whiteboard and pointed out that if 5 million people wasted an additional 10 seconds booting the computer, the sum of time of all users would be equivalent to 100 human lifetimes every year. And a few weeks later, Kenyon returned. He rewrote the code that booted 28 seconds faster than before. Now, this is a cool and fun story because it shows that even though when people around Steve Jobs were telling him that they couldn't do something, he kept changing the reality and getting them to think in a way where they could do something. And this, I think, is a very, very important and useful skill for leaders today. As a leader of a team or a function or a business, you have to be able to create your own reality distortion field. So one of the stories that I have in my book on leading with vulnerability is from Fleetwood Grobler. And he was the CEO of a South African energy company. The company was $13 billion in debt. And when he took over as CEO, everybody thought the company was going to go bankrupt. The company was going to go downhill and the banks were going to come and repossess it. And I think he had that ability to create that reality distortion field because when he was talking to his employees, he was telling them, I know we can rebuild trust in the eyes of our customers and our employees. I know I have a vision of where we can go. Come with me on this journey. He created this new reality where employees believed that they could get out of this terrible and crazy mess that they were in. And that's exactly what they did. So it's important for leaders to be able to create that reality distortion field for themselves. But I'm not talking about just believing in blind optimism. I'm not just talking about creating a picture that's not realistic. For leaders, it's important to have that reality distortion field, but to also balance it with a sense of practicality. So I jotted down a couple things here that I wanted to go over around how to balance creating that reality distortion field with also having that reality component in there, which is truthful and practical and realistic and achievable. So a couple things to create that reality distortion field. Let's start with that first. Vision, right? You have to be able to create a picture of where you are and where things can go. And it needs to be a picture that people, it can be a big picture idea, but it also needs to be something that people could potentially wrap their minds around. Look at Elon Musk. One day we're going to colonize Mars. Crazy thought, but something that you could see as potentially happening. So creating that vision. You also need to be confident in your vision. If you create a vision and then a couple of weeks or a couple of months later, you're like, I had this vision. I'm not sure if it's going to be able to be possible now. Let's change it to this. That's not going to create a reality distortion field for you. So you need to be very clear on the vision that you're creating. And before you introduce that vision to other people, make sure that it's a vision you can actually get behind. Another thing that you can do is to create that culture of innovation for a reality distortion field. So if you have this big picture vision, but you don't have a corporate culture where employees can innovate and experiment and create ideas and give feedback and challenge assumptions, then what's the point of that vision? Right? If you have a status quo hierarchy, I have this crazy vision that I'm going to introduce, and by the way, don't ask me any questions, it doesn't make sense. So the vision that you create the confidence that you have behind that vision needs to be balanced with the innovation and the corporate culture that you are creating. Next is you can set ambitious goals. So set ambitious goals that go behind the vision, right? The vision is kind of the big nebulous thing out here. The goals are what you need to do to achieve that vision. So next, let's talk about how we can do some of the practicality in here. So when you're setting these goals, make sure that they are supported in some sort of reality and planning, right? I mean, so for example, if you're meeting with your finance team, you're meeting with executive team, let's say you've been growing by 5% a year. If you come out there all of a sudden and create a goal and say, hey, I know we've been growing by 5% every year. Well, I want to grow by 200% a year now. Nobody's going to look at you and say, yeah, let's get behind that. People are going to look at you and say, you seem like you're a little off your rocker. So the goals that you have need to be, they can be stretch goals, but make sure that they're realistic. So stretch goals that are realistic of potentially getting achieved, not something that is just so Looney Tunes that people can't get behind it. You also want to make sure that you are tracking progress on those goals, right? That'll kind of help create that sense of practicality there. And you also want to make sure that you are adaptable. So one of the ways that you balance this reality distortion field with actual reality is that you need to be adaptable, right? If things aren't going your way, you can kind of adjust course, see what you need to do, take different steps. I think Elon Musk does a fantastic job of that. He creates a fantastic reality distortion field, whether it's around space, whether it's around creating electric vehicles. And he pivots and changes and course corrects all the time. So I think those are some very good steps that people can take to create that reality distortion field, but also make sure that they balance it with a sense of practicality and reality. And if you can do that, so if you can create this new reality and your employees can buy into that reality, that vision, that future that you can create, if they feel like anything is possible and you can temper that with a sense of groundedness, then I think that you as a leader are going to be able to achieve really amazing things inside of your team and inside of your organization. And again, Elon Musk is a great example of this. Steve Jobs is a great example of this. I had one other here that I wanted to go over. Sarah Blakely, who created the brand Spanx, I think is a great example of this as well. And you can Google their stories and see what they've done. So Spanx, essentially, brand created from nothing. She had this very compelling vision for her company, but she also was very grounded in developing that vision by getting customer feedback and being realistic with what customers were telling her. So a couple stories, you can look those up separately. The whole point of this video is just to create that reality distortion field, paint that vision, but also make sure that it is grounded in some semblance of reality. Hope you're having a wonderful day, a wonderful week, and I hope you enjoyed this video. I'll see you soon.